WWT presents Experts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of WWT Experts. I'm your host, Matthew Coble, as always, and today we are delighted to be here with two experts from WWT as part of our four-part series on higher education and how universities are embracing artificial intelligence, digital transformation, and other technologies for their operations, for world-class campuses, for top-notch student experiences, and more. In other episodes in this series, we talk with higher education experts, students, university leaders, and we encourage you to check those out. But today, we're going to be speaking to two folks from Worldwide Technology about cybersecurity and how that plays a role in the higher education space. So with me today, Michael Sink is Chief Technology Advisor for Higher Education at Worldwide Technology. He's got over 25 years of experience delivering really innovative IT solutions across lots of industries, higher education, of course, banking, healthcare, and others. And prior to Worldwide Technology, he held leadership roles at the University of Central Florida and the University of South Florida and helped both of those universities with their digital transformation journeys. Also with us, Bryan Liebert, who's Chief Information Security Officer for our East region and a public sector client base. He's got nearly 30 years of experience working globally on security programs for Fortune 100 clients and lots of other organizations on topics like enterprise security, cyber regulatory compliance, and risk management. He's based in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's often bringing his cybersecurity expertise to our public sector clients, obviously including higher education. Mike, Bryan, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us, Matt.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, great to have you both with us. So, opening question for you, what are the unique cybersecurity challenges that universities and colleges face compared to what other industries are looking at?
Yeah, so I can start. I think if you think about the complexity of universities, they have such a massive surface area they have to protect. They're very complex. They have a number of services that they offer in addition to what goes on in the classroom. In many ways, they're like a small city. They have police forces, they have venues where they have fan experiences. So all of that means that they're collecting a lot of data. There's a lot of technology involved with providing those experiences. Many institutions have research programs that involve intellectual property, controlled unclassified information, classified information. Some universities have academic medical centers with patient data, so that obviously means they have to comply with HIPAA regulations. So again, in addition to the large surface area just of the campus in general and all the services they offer, there's so many compliance and regulatory requirements they have to contend with. Things like FERPA, GLBR, GDPR, CMMC, PCI, HIPAA, so the whole alphabet soup they have to deal with. I think another challenge that they have is the distributed, decentralized organizational structure that's typical within higher ed. A lot of units operate with a lot of autonomy. They procure a lot of their assets, build a lot of their applications. Some even have their own dedicated infrastructure and IT personnel. So just having visibility across all the assets that have to be protected is quite a challenge. Mm-hmm. Bryan, what would you add to that?
Yeah, building on that, Mike, it's clear that you come from this background because you hit on a lot of the points that first come to mind. I'll just enhance that by saying when I was with the Virginia Department of Corrections and met with the higher ed CISOs in Virginia, it was often a matter of our research requires our folks to delve into all parts of the internet, all types of data, no matter where it may be found, sometimes even though we know it's in a dangerous location. So that necessary academic environment of being able to go into areas that other enterprises might be able to block off or restrict access to. Also, higher ed folks might be connecting from anywhere in the world, and sometimes that creates issues. But mainly you hit the biggest ones. The biggest ones are that a higher ed organization is multiple organizations within. Just doubling down, like you said, public safety. We don't think about that. There's a police department on campus. There might even be water facilities on campus, fire facilities on campus. So that complexity of regulatory environment, from the student environment to the faculty environment to the research environment, creates very unique control situations required in higher ed.
Yeah. Well, speaking about that highly decentralized environment, all those different pieces and that soup of acronyms, Mike, that you spoke to, are universities typically looking to do this at more of those departmental levels, those incremental levels? Are they really having success laddering that up to more of a, as we might say, enterprise look at security and their approach to security for all the things that they do?
What I've seen work best is if you have capabilities within those units and they have good visibility of their assets, and they have the staff that can support it, that's fine. But I do think they have to roll up to a CISO or someone at a higher level that, it's where the buck stops here kind of position that is ultimately responsible for the information security across campus. I think if you distribute too much of that and you delegate too much of it, bad things start to happen. It's difficult to get your arms around all of it unless all of those systems kind of roll up under the same policies, the same governance. So I've always advocated for more of a central approach. To me, security is a common good. It's something that is provided really from top down. There's obviously a need to balance, innovation and that sort of thing. And I think we'll get to some of that later. But I think the best way to do it is to have a central organization that is ultimately responsible for security. Hopefully you've got people that are in those other units that can help support that.
Just springboarding off of that, though, this is one of the great struggles of universities, centralizing or decentralizing. And unfortunately, the individual departments often have unique needs. Like I've even seen scenarios where a certain research group isn't even allowed to grant access to people outside of their group. So at the same time that I'm with Mike, centralization is excellent and bringing it together. The tools that the industry has given us of multi-tenant cloud environments and zero trust and segmentation are really giving opportunities for universities to centralize governance and control, which is what Mike's talking about, and it's absolutely necessary, but also have some multi-tenancy and some separations that can create reduction of audit scope. For example, if you're dealing with controlled and classified information, anything to do with certain parts of the government, and if you can keep that contained within a multi-tenant kind of a micro environment within the broader university environment, then your audit scope for CUI can be reduced. Likewise, if you have a healthcare area, and same thing, if you can control that data and keep that within that healthcare tenant or zone or segment, that can create great opportunities for maintaining the central control that Mike mentioned that's critical, but also limiting how far these deep regulations, that alphabet soup, have to extend into other areas of the university.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just make one more comment to that, Matt. The reason that I think you need at least some centralized governance around cybersecurity is what happens if there is an event on campus, a breach, ransomware, whatever. Typically, you have a run book that needs to be followed. And if everybody's kind of doing their own thing, you're going to get pretty disjointed very quickly. So there really needs to be a centralized policy procedure kind of thing where regardless of where the attack happens, where the threat occurs, there has to be a central response. It could involve paying a ransom or contacting law enforcement, sending out marketing and communications messages. So that really needs to be coordinated in more of a central fashion. So I just wanted to add that on because I think that's important as well, as the response to some of the threats or some of the events that happen is critical to make sure that at least that's centralized.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all that you're describing, to me, characterizes the university space as pretty unique in that on the one hand, there's a ton of stuff to secure, but on the other hand, we want to have this sort of open, free, kind of academic, research-led environment where anything is possible. So could you speak a little bit about how university leaders kind of find the right balance between those two things, both in terms of the technology decisions they're making, but also how they communicate that out to the university community?
Yeah, I'll start, and I really want to hear what Bryan has to say, because I've been in a lot of situations with Bryan where he's been talking to universities about the need to take a risk-based approach, an impact-based approach. Not every event or threat or detection is going to be the same across the institution. So you really have to measure the risk versus the cost of protecting certain systems. You do want to maintain an open, collaborative environment, but at the same time, you have to understand classification of data and that sort of thing, and apply the appropriate security controls based on that classification. For example, one research project where you're communicating with multiple institutions for something that is more public information related, you don't have to put as many controls over that. And there's an expectation that that data is going to be shared with the public. But for something that might be controlled unclassified or even classified, that's going to require a different policy, a different set of security policy and mechanisms to protect that data. So I think it's important to take a risk-based approach to understand what the risks are depending on the services that are being provided, the types of data that's being collected. But again, I want to turn that over to Bryan too, because I know that he's had a lot of conversations with institutions about how to do that.
And honestly, they're still struggling with this. And so we partner with them all the time to learn where there have been successes and challenges, and to layer on our expertise and experience, having been in that field for Mike and me near that field. But honestly, this is still a challenge. And one of the greatest things I'm seeing causing this challenge is what I call the shiny object syndrome. Folks hear from various different sides, whether it's Gartner, whether it's Forrester, whether it's OEMs, that we've got the holy grail object for this. And I would submit to you that my opinion after 30 years is there is not a holy grail. There is not a one size fits all. Each university is going to be unique and it's going to be different. And the thing that's most successful in my experience is, yes, leverage some of these very exciting technologies for zero trust, for segmentation, for multi-tenancy. But really, it's all about back to the basics. And Mike touched on it in the last answer. It's that governance, a strong governance. What program am I going to follow? Am I going to follow NIST or ISO or SANS or something along those lines? What methodology am I going to follow, like an ITIL or an OWASP or a Center for Security Alliance, something along those lines? And then how am I going to bring that together into a pattern that all the elements of the university can follow? And it's by dealing with these cyber hygiene items and fundamentally understanding, number one, I've got to know where all my assets are. Number two, I have to know where all the data is in relation to the assets. And then number three, I won't go through the whole stack for the sake of time. Who has access and should they? So Mike and I have been very successful putting together kind of flowchart type trees of what's important, putting it in a sequence, risk prioritizing it for limited time, resources, and money. And that's the best way to balance. And we'll hit on more of that in the rest of the questions.
Mm-hmm. All right, gentlemen, I'm thinking that the attacks universities face can be, phishing, ransomware, data breaches, potentially even treading into attacks by nation state actors, other adversaries. What are you seeing out in the marketplace in terms of the most common attacks that universities need to be mindful of? And are there any that you're thinking about that we need to know that are coming up that we need to pay more attention to?
Yeah, I think many of the threats that affect higher ed are the ones that you see in the market. So I don't think there's necessarily anything unique in higher ed, other than I think there's a lot of goodies inside of higher ed in terms of intellectual property, student data, financial data, even classified information that threat actors may want to get their hands on. But in terms of the types of attacks, phishing is a big concern. Ransomware continues to be a big concern. Certainly nation state attacks. DDoS attacks, dynamic denial of service attacks continue to be a threat. And I think, when you look at the top 10 priorities across higher ed, so there's a body called EDUCAUSE, and it's basically a learning consortium around IT for higher education. And they publish an annual top 10 list. And for the last 3 years in a row, cybersecurity has been the #1 priority on the minds of IT professionals in higher education. So cyber is not going anywhere in terms of a priority or a focus. But when you look at the types of attacks, one of the biggest reasons that those attacks are successful is human error. People are clicking on the wrong things. So security awareness and those programs that are educating students, faculty, and staff about how to thwart those attacks, recognizing potential attacks before they happen, is really one way to battle most of these things up front.
So since he went high, I'll go low. He gave you the high level. I'll give you some underlying detail. One of the greatest things that you can check out in relation to this to get real world data on breaches is the Verizon data breach study. I reference it all the time. The Verizon data breach study for 2024, when speaking of education, they tracked 1,780 incidents with 1,537 confirmed breaches. And out of those, system intrusion, social engineering, and miscellaneous errors represent 90% of the breaches. The threat actors, 68% of the time were external, 32% of the time were internal. Now there's a really interesting contrast there on that internal. Insider threat and internal threat has dropped sub 10% for almost every industry except higher ed. And in higher ed, it remains at 32%. Now, a lot of that can be the misconfigurations, which is just an accident. And we always have to keep that in mind. The motivations, 98% of the time are financial, 2% of the time are espionage. I question that 2% of the time of espionage, though, and I really want to speak to our higher ed partners out there and say, we really need to be watching for this. There are certain nation states that have openly acknowledged and said the way we are going to advance our country is by deliberately capturing data that institutes like higher ed are learning and advancing and researching, and we are going to actively pursue that and take that and use that to the benefit of our own country. So I think we need to really be watching for espionage and really be watching research data, especially for programs that are highly specialized. And the final thing I'll share is that 83% of the time the data compromised was personally identifiable information. 20% of the time it was internal. 18% of the time it was other, and credentials were 9%. Now I question Verizon data breaches numbers there because that's greater than 100%. But I still think that's what's published, and it's of interest for us to consider it.
Juniper's first AI native networking platform is specifically designed to utilize AI ops to guarantee optimal end-to-end experiences for both operators and end users. This advanced platform ensures that every connection is reliable, measurable, and secure across all devices, users, applications, and assets.
Gentlemen, we can't have any conversation today without bringing up the topic of artificial intelligence. So I'm curious how you're seeing universities leveraging AI to advance their cybersecurity capabilities and kind of provide protection. And on the flip side is, do you see universities worried about how AI is going to sort of be used by adversaries?
Yeah, there's a cartoon that I used to take a look at in the funny clips, Spy versus Spy, and I think at some point we're going to be in that boat where it's going to be AI versus AI, and whoever has the best AI is going to win. But today, a lot of the tools that universities are deploying, firewalls, endpoint detection and response, they have AI built in. So many of these tools are already leveraging AI and machine learning to help battle the security threats that are out there. And those are going to continue to get better. I do think that there's three different ways that I think about security and AI. There's security for AI, because you have new AI systems that have large language models that are plugging into APIs that may have third-party applications that are integrated. There's large data sets behind those. You have to protect these new AI systems. So there's security for AI. There's security with AI. So again, many of the products that universities are buying and deploying right now in the security space have AI built in. Again, that's going to continue to evolve. And then there's security by AI, or threats by AI. And that's where the attackers are beginning to use AI to help the efficacy of their programs and their threats against universities. And so I think the more that universities understand how the threat actors are using AI, the better they're going to be able to help protect against that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the biggest thing in AI that I see is for universities specifically. Mike touched on it, so I'll try to put a twist and enhancement on it. We'll see how I do, because he knows universities far better than I do. But you can essentially do a lot of research about security issues with the LLM side of AI. We all know that LLMs hallucinate. We all know that their data sets are not perfect, but it's still very, very helpful to hit 2 or 3 AIs and ask them a question on any cybersecurity challenge you're facing, and just make sure you've got a good baseline to work from. The next thing that Mike also touched on is AI built into tools. We can do ourselves a great service by, AI's been out long enough. A lot of the security tools pioneered their AI in early 2024, some even sooner. And so now we have what universities and higher ed love, and that's data. And we can look at things like the SOC prior to AI, it was taking an average of X amount of time to look at a threat. And now with AI, how much has that been enhanced? How much quicker is it? With automation of AI around security tools, how long was it taking us to perform tasks before, and what was that costing us? And of course, higher ed is the master of crunching these data sets. So understanding the effective AI capabilities that are in security tools that they can purchase and use to protect the university. And then, of course, we've had this theme throughout. Universities are multiple entities within one. And one of the greatest strengths of AI is crawling data. So crawling data across multiple entities to give you ideas for defense and protection, and to help you aggregate and cross-reference and correlate data from those disparate entities across the security platforms of a university. Those are some ways that they can use it to better protect. And of course, you know, nowadays you can't order a burger without some AI fries with that. So, you know.
Yeah, true enough. All right, well, you know, one of the things I know we talk about here at Worldwide Technology is the idea of being secure altogether, right? We all have a responsibility to participate in that with our tools, within our industries, within our organizations. And universities have lots of constituencies with students, faculty, staff, researchers, alumni. You know, how are university leaders really building that culture of cybersecurity mindfulness and making sure everybody knows the role they need to play in that?
Yeah, I think awareness campaigns are absolutely necessary. They're critical. And the once a year, half a day cyber training or a couple hours of cyber training, you know, that everybody has to go and view and check the box is really not as effective as periodic, even, you know, routine awareness campaigns. And maybe it's something that's very specific, like especially for phishing threats that affect end users more than, say, maybe some other things. Having campaigns around those types of threats, I think, is important. So again, the frequent reminders, telling stories, letting people know what's at stake. So don't just say, don't click on these things, and then have campaigns that kind of trick people into doing it and then slapping their hand. Let people know what's at stake. Tell stories about other institutions that have been attacked successfully and what the impact has been. And I think once people are aware of what's at stake and what the impact is, they're much more likely to pay attention. So I think awareness is key. And maybe even having competitions around, you know, the departments that have the fewest. When you go through these campaigns, there are email tools out there that are leveraged that can simulate an attack. So maybe have campaigns where people are really paying attention to these, where there's a reward, maybe gift cards, if that's allowable, those kinds of things to really get people involved. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so there's a lot of activity typically in October. But again, it can't be once a year. These are campaigns that have to really roll throughout the year.
Yeah, and just to build on that, continuous awareness and training. We misuse those terms, we overuse those terms, we abuse those terms, but literally it's got to be baked into the culture of the university so that it's baked into the minds of the students, so that it's baked in when they enter the workforce and even nowadays at home. These threats that face our universities and face our enterprises are now even facing us in the home. With IoT in the home, you've got IP addresses on your refrigerator. I just built a home, and for goodness sakes, my ceiling fan is asking me to connect it to the Wi-Fi. It's just pervasive. So we can't overemphasize enough that continuous awareness and training is absolutely necessary. You may remember just a moment ago, the Verizon data breach study. System intrusion was one, misconfiguration was one, and social engineering. And in the advent of AI, which was our last question, this is only going to get worse. AI is going to help the adversaries make their phishing and smishing even more plausible. Phishing is when somebody just shoots randomly. Spear phishing is when somebody targets people specifically. And there's news articles that you can find where they're faking the voice of a finance leader and convincing perhaps faculty to transfer money or things along those lines. So those are some thoughts on educational training for the students and the faculty. It's just got to be continuous and pervasive and literally baked into everything.
Well, Brian, I hope you've got those IoT devices, the ceiling fans, toasters, whatnot, segmented off in a different subnet on your network there at the house, because I would expect nothing less from you.
I actually do.
All right, very good. I love it. Well, listen, I'm curious, universities definitely have a role to play in educating, students into the next generation of cybersecurity and really helping build cybersecurity professionals for the marketplace. And we know there's a ton of demand for that and a lot of roles going unfilled in that space. So I'm curious whether you're seeing universities leaning into that opportunity and really doing a good job of teaching students broadly about cybersecurity, but more importantly, building that next generation of cybersecurity professional.
Yeah, Matt, absolutely. There are a lot of universities out there that have fantastic cyber curriculums. There degrees in cybersecurity that students are graduating with now. There are great examples of internships. We at Worldwide hire interns and put them through some of our cybersecurity programs as well. They work with our cyber professionals. There are a lot of public-private partnership examples out there that are starting to emerge where companies are working with universities to staff maybe it's their security operations centers. They're providing additional resources for the task at hand, but those students are also getting valuable hands-on experience on real tools and in real scenarios as they're going through their education. And that's a win-win-win because the universities are working with these private partnerships for internships, so their students are getting real-world benefits. The universities are actually using those security operations centers, so there's a security benefit to the institution. And the private partnerships are benefiting because they're getting access to, less expensive labor, and they're building a pipeline for those people to come and work at those companies that are providing those services. So I think we see some great examples. Students are very interested in cyber because they know that there's a lot of demand for those jobs. And so I think universities have done a good job in responding to that.
Yeah. Well, Brian, are you seeing that out in the marketplace too? As you see young talent coming in, is it coming out of the universities, or how are people learning about that?
Wow, this is one of the most exciting realms of cybersecurity to me. And it's challenging because today's generation learns differently than our generation did. There's visual learners, there's tactile learners, there's auditory learners. I'm seeing people coming out of cyber games, the US cyber games. I'm seeing people come out of universities. There's a twist on this too, and universities are going to be key in this. There's been 500,000 tech workers laid off from 2022, 2023, and 2024. And so not only do we have to think of these up-and-comers fresh out of these universities and how we can make them most appealing. WWT is doing academies and we're doing internships, and those are incredibly successful. But we've also got to consider retraining these folks that have been laid off and might be revisiting the university to brush off their skills. So the opportunity is so exciting, and we're seeing our higher ed partners play just a fascinating role here in these extracurricular styles of training like cyber ranges and red teams and blue teams, and WWT is doing red teams and blue teams and purple teams. So yeah, there's a massive role to play, and there's even a twist I would like to put a challenge out to the universities to maybe do more of what I don't know they're doing and maybe they are doing, but focus on also educating the hiring managers out there. I think we're missing the fact that there are trained cyber workers. This is an opinion, it's not scientific, so maybe some of our higher ed partners will tease me, but I think there's more cyber workers out there that just haven't been matched with a job yet. So I'd like to challenge our universities to focus as much on the students as also focusing on the hiring managers and influencing them to be creative in seeking some of these people that I think are out there that aren't being matched with a good job yet.
Mm-hmm. Could be something for career services to tap on within the higher ed institutions. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, gentlemen, last question for you. I often like to ask our experts to peer into the future a little bit. So I'm curious if there are any emerging technologies, regulatory contexts, market trends that you see coming up in the university space in the next 3 to 5 years that you're particularly excited about and you think that the organizations need to get prepared for?
Yeah, I'll kind of repeat what I said a little bit earlier, but those 3 areas are going to continue to expand, Matt. I think securing for AI as AI becomes more prominent. I think the last note that I saw or statistic I saw was about 65% of organizations are plowing full speed ahead with AI. That trajectory is going to continue to look like a hockey stick. Securing with AI, leveraging AI with tools that already have AI embedded, using AI to help respond to threats, and then securing against AI. Again, we talked about some of the threat actors beginning to use AI. The threats are coming faster, they're more sophisticated, and so you're really going to have to use AI to fight against the AI that the threat actors are using. So those are just trends that I see continuing, and I think they're going to continue to accelerate. I think understanding the risks that you have around the vulnerabilities with AI and the high performance architectures, these architectures are different than what people are used to. There's a lot of traditional application security things that you can do that are, I think, familiar to people, but there are some uniquenesses and some differences. How to secure AI models, these large data sets that have been used to train. How can those data sets be poisoned? How to protect your application programming interfaces, your APIs, and then understanding the chain of custody of all these applications as you really have more of an application ecosystem around all the tools and utilities and services, whether it's cloud apps versus on-prem. So it's the sophistication of securing your environment is definitely growing. But again, I think it's going to be important to find ways to leverage AI to expand your capacity to protect the assets that you have to be able to respond, to detect vulnerabilities. And again, many tools are going to include AI. And I think it's important, again, to learn the methods that threat actors are going to be using so that you understand how best to prevent those attacks and to defend against those attacks.
Mm-hmm. Brian, how about you?
Well, he left something for me. Yeah, he left something for me. I think we're going to have to rewrite that old childhood song, E-I-E-I-O, dad joke here. I think it's going to be A-I-A-I-O. So my kids love and hate my dad jokes. You left little for me there, Mike, because you were so thorough and comprehensive. But the next thing is going to be quantum computing. AI is not only going to help us conquer quantum computing, but it's going to enhance it. I got a briefing on quantum just this week, and as I understand it, part of quantum computing is 3 computers with one. One of those is AI driven, one of those is GPU driven, and of course, one of those is quantum driven. So I'm not an expert on it yet. Somebody might pick apart that little characterization there. But in addition to AI, I think we need to be looking to the baseline. So as we're turning out these students, we're turning out, when you go to a doctor, you might have a heart doctor, a podiatrist, but underneath all of that is a general MD. And I would challenge our university partners to be remembering that these students still need that core baseline. all of cyber, including the most revolutionary AI and quantum, is built on the baseline, things like route switch, things like DNS, the underlying pieces and parts. And so the most successful student and the most successful university going forward, and what I'm most excited about, is training people to that baseline so that they can specialize in these exciting things. And I think that's going to turn out the students of the future and the universities of the future, and obviously enhanced by AI.
Excellent. Well, that's a great way for us to wrap our session today. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us, Matt. Enjoyed it.
Pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you for coming as well. Another great episode of WWT Experts. And remember, this is one of 4 we have on higher education, and one of which is with a student who's learning about cybersecurity. So you want to check those 3 out as well. And we've got a great catalog of episodes of all kinds that you can watch on WWT.com and a calendar of what's coming up in the future. So please join us there and check that out. If you get a survey from today's session, we'd love to hear your feedback, or you can just drop us an email and ask any questions, or let us know what you thought about how we did today. And with that, we'll wrap things up. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next time.